just jump into whatever. Hey, welcome back, everybody. You're in the team room with the team here at One's Ready. We were just talking before we hit record. Actually, Peaches came in about 2 seconds late. No big deal. We're going to let it go. But we were just talking, Trent and I were just talking about critical thinking and problem solving. And we were exploring a topic. And I'd like you guys to be involved in this because we think it's pretty good. Well, we think it's good because I'm a narcissistic douchebag and everything I think I do is good. But that's not the point. The point is we were talking about problem solving and we were talking about how it is that we actually do things that are meant for the betterment of ourselves, right? And I started this conversation off with Trent by saying, I really hate that I've done all this work on myself to be a good person. And of course he laughed and he's like, what do you mean? I said, well, now I go into this weird spiral, right? And I think, okay, I'm having a problem or I'm angry at this person. And then I immediately, like a movie, go into my own head and go, okay, wait a second. Why are you angry? Did they actually do anything wrong? You're supposed to reflect on this and you're supposed to really unpack this problem and see what it is. And then, oh, by the way, this person is their own valid person that has their own problems in their own world that they're trying to deal with. And maybe you should cut them a little slack. And then I just spiral into that. And for all of the work that I've done, I never seem to get to an answer. I just seem to think about the problem more deeply. And it always ends in the same place. Aaron, you are an idiot. How did you handle the situation so poorly? And Peaches, that is what we were talking about before.
You can only come to so many conclusions. The problem is working on yourself. You learn more things. And when you learn more things, you realize that the world is not a cleaner place. The world is a dirtier place, or a messier place when it comes to people and emotions and how it all works. And so it doesn't make life any cleaner. Once you try to understand everybody else and all their situations and understand where they're coming from and understanding where you're coming from, which is like the biggest hurdle out the gate, right? Is understanding yourself. But then when you start to project that, because that's what we do, right? Once you actually understand yourself, because we project this like bullshit version of ourselves on people all the time. But once you do the work and you understand like who you are and you start break stuff down, and then you start to project that like empathetic, like true understanding onto other people, man, it just makes life hard because you can't just like write them off. You can't just tell them to go away because they're stupid because, we're all stupid.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the one of my favorite words. And I can't remember. I saw it on a meme, of course, because that's how we take in information now. But there's a list of words that have meanings that you just didn't know. Sonder is my favorite one of those words. And Sonder is the acute realization that everybody that you see, everybody in the world has a life as full and as rich and as troublesome and as joyous and as sad and confusing as yours. And once you realize that, it's really hard to be like mean to people. And I used road rage when we were just talking about it before. Man, I do not, road rage. I don't know what it is. Like Louis C.K. joked about road rage. You will just say the most vile things. Like you'll honk. I saw a guy just because somebody was driving, like merged poorly. Washington State drivers are terrible, but somebody merged poorly. And some guy, like this poor, like 75-year-old woman, some guy in a big truck, like swerves, gets right up and like does the finger point mad thing and then like speeds off. But if you were in an elevator with that person and they made you mad, would you be like, you piece of shit? Like road rage for whatever reason is a thing. But once you have that realization that you don't know what that person is going through that day, you don't know how their mental state is. Like she could be driving from a funeral from one of her friends and you're just yelling at her on the highway. Once you realize that other people really are actual people and they're not just non-playable characters, they're not just NPCs floating around in this simulation, it's really hard to put that negativity in the world.
Did you just connect with the young folks out there? Is that what just happened?
Never. I just opened myself up for somebody to make fun of me for trying to, use the kids' slang. That this should be busted for real, no cap, on God.
So the road rage thing is interesting because there's that aspect of it that you're talking about, but there's also the instantaneous part of getting angry is, and I've heard people talk about it on other podcasts, is the fact that, if you've been driving for a while, like you don't even think about it now, whether you're doing 70 on the highway or whatever it is, you don't even think about it now, but there is still a heightened level of stress on your body. And there's an expectation of the people that are around you in the lanes or in front of you, behind you, that they are going to be safe, that they're going to acknowledge that you're next to them and not move into your lane or whatever it is. And so whenever somebody does mess up, that you go from, 0 or operating at a level of 1 to all of a sudden it's a 7, when really the issue or the incident wasn't that big of a deal, but it could have been. And deep inside your brain know that the outcome could have been really, really bad.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that, you're already operating in a heightened sense of stress. And so an incident like that will just like take you to a whole nother level. But you're right. Understanding that people, and I think because we're naturally narcissistic, we care about what's going on in our world with ourselves, and we don't put ourselves in other people's lives, that we often forget about that. And I mean, life is not black and white. It is convoluted as shit. It really is. Yeah. And man, if you can just give people the benefit of the doubt and, maybe for a second think like, okay, well, this person might have something going on. So let me just kind of give them a little bit of, not mercy, but there's a better word for grace. There you go.
Extend them some grace.
Yeah. But
and what a hard thing to do, like people get in gunfights over traffic disputes. People die because they get into a fender bender or they cut somebody off, and people get into, no kidding, fights for their life over the smallest thing. Like I was driving through Denver recently, and it was at the end of a long drive. I was driving from Washington down to New Mexico. So I was tired. It was the end of the day. It was pretty busy in Denver. It was, mid-afternoon, 4 o'clock, whatever. We're going pretty fast. It's one of the bigger highways. It had to be, one of the I-5 or whatever north-south, runs through there. But somebody came over 2 lanes and almost hit me so bad that I had one out. I had to swerve. And when I did, the car got light. I don't know if you guys know what that feeling is, but when you're a high speed and you're like, oh no, this car is not it. Like I ended up going, and luckily there was nobody in the 2 lanes next to me, but I had barely corrected before I hit the wall. And just for a second, like on the shoulder, and just for a second in my head, I was like, I said it out loud. I was like, oh no, like this is it. It never dawned on me to correct my car, then find the other car that almost killed me, and then go accost them. You know what I mean? And I think it's because,
wait, really?
Luckily I I know. Well, I was in their blind spot. They didn't mean to do it. They weren't trying to run me off the road. They just didn't know that I was there, and they were in their own world. We automatically apply malice to people. We apply intent to people that don't have it. That person wasn't trying to kill me. Maybe they were, and I yet again, I remain undefeated in assassination attempts. But maybe they were looking at their phone. Maybe they were in the wrong. But immediately, that's what we go to. And I think that's what we're talking about. As you get a little bit better at working on yourself and giving yourself distance from that immediate impulsive reaction to be mad or imply intent, then you really start going, oh, okay, well, how should I think through this one? And while granted, it makes you a better person, it is tough. It's tough to get there because you really end up with more questions than you do answers.
Yeah. So at what point do you do a spot correction then? In terms of, to give you an example, like yesterday I took my son to the park, and as we're walking out in the crossing the street in the parking lot, some lady almost hits us. She's cruising going slow, like she's creeping, right? But she's not looking because I can see her. She's got her phone right here, and she's cruising to a parking lot filled with kids. And it's like, okay, what is the point of whether it's road rage or, hey, you need to pull your head out of your ass and right. At least, if it's one thing, if you want to do that on the highway, like I still don't agree with it, but I've been guilty of it, right? I've been guilty of checking my phone or sending a quick text or something like that.
Oh yeah.
But the one thing that I haven't done is in a parking lot filled with kids in a playground. And I'm talking about, there's probably 75 kids here and hanging out on my phone. So like, I didn't say anything, but I no kidding, I thought about that. I was like, is this one of those points or times that I kind of do a, hey, WTF? Like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Yeah. But
I think you found it. Like, if you're on the highway and you said like, oh, I've checked my phone before, and you've justified that action while you're driving, right? Mm-hmm. And that's what we all want to do. We justify our own actions, but we won't justify other people's actions. But also, like, learning has to occur, because you can justify it over and over again, then it turns into a habit. And like this lady who's like, oh, like, she probably doesn't think that she has a problem checking her phone while she's driving. And she probably, she's not trying to run over kids, hopefully.
No.
I know it's Vegas, so whatever. But, but it leads to bad habits, right? Like, the more we justify our own actions instead of taking accountability for it, that's what leads to habits, and that's what happens with other people. So, and then you confront them on it. They've justified that action so many times, and then they don't view themselves as doing anything wrong because they've justified it a million times, and now it's habitual. So, like, they're not like, no one keeps a tally in their head of like all the things that I've done wrong, and maybe I have a problem. Quitting is for quitters or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, I don't got a problem.
It's very profound.
Yeah. But you know what I mean? Like, justify an action enough times, it becomes a habit, and you don't think that it's a you problem, it's an everybody else problem, and it's a vicious cycle amongst our society.
Yeah, for sure. You're not joking there.
So I think if we're talking about when do you make that spot correction, and when do you hop out of that, kind of that circle of like, oh, is it right? Is it wrong? I think it's when other people are affected and you can imply intent. Like, even it might not be malicious intent, but if somebody is either not paying attention, like your my car example or your park example, when other people can be negatively affected, that's 100% when it is. I tell this, or I give this analogy all the time. I am at a point in my life where if you walk up to me and you are aggressive towards me and me alone, I very rarely do I care. You could punch me in the face, and the first thing I'm going to do is probably go, "Hey, dude, why? What is your deal? Like, if you're not trying to like kill me, if you're not approaching me with a weapon or something, and you just get super aggressive towards me, I don't respond to that at all. I don't care. Like, I fight 4 times a week as it is. Grown men try to choke me unconscious a whole bunch of times. Like, I've been in a fight before, right? So for me, I'm like, okay, well, what's the deal? What is your issue? What's the problem? The second that anybody else is with me, right? If T is with me, if people in my area are being accosted, if you do that to one of my friends, and by the way, it could be a friend that's perfectly fine on his own. It could be a big, strong special operator. And if you accost him, I immediately, and I go from zero to 10, and I'm going to steal this and put it out there, but the continuum of violence is 0 to 10, right? And earlier in my life, I used to think that you just use the bare minimum amount of violence, right? So if somebody is in a situation and they're at a 3, I used to be like, okay, well, I could fix this with a 5. I'll find the reel and I'll post it. Somebody described it. 0 to 10 is risk. You're accepting risk at every single one of those. If I go to a 5 and my opponent goes to a 7, I'm dead. So now the continuum of violence it's binary for me now. It's either I'm going to be violent or I'm not. And there's no in between. Like, you have to go to unchecked violence and finish whatever that fight is, whatever that looks like, immediately. And you have to do it before your opponent does it. So I think that's where the spot correction happens, violence aside. And this could be in any circumstance. It doesn't have to be violent. It could be adversarial. It could be, cart narcs. What do you, when do you accost somebody for not putting their cart away? Well, the second they get in their car and they look like they're not putting that cart away, maybe it's time to engage there. And I think that's where the line is for me, is when other people are involved, or when I can, no kidding, see some sort of intent by that person, and that intent is not within the social construct that we have. And Peach's great job explaining, the traffic scenario, but there's an unwritten social contract that everybody agrees to on the road. I know I could die, so I'm going to pay attention. I know I could kill other people. I'm going to follow the traffic laws, and I'm not going to swerve out of my lane. And there's a certain culture that we interact in a car. And if you want to see how it's different, go drive somewhere else. I can tell you driving in Kenya is remarkably different than driving in Washington State, or driving in Europe is remarkably different than driving other places.
Yeah, for sure. I'd say German drivers are by far some of the best.
They are awesome. Well, man, the Germans are great at infrastructure,
Yeah.
Very orderly.
Yeah. But I mean, like, they are. Now, you want to talk about a culture that is very black and white, of course. They are like, they are that way. They are strict rule followers, stuff like that. We're going to go into something completely different if I continue down that. But, and I don't mean in a bad way. I'm just mean like, we're going to get off topic.
Yeah.
Escalation of force, though.
I was going to say,
we're not on the topic.
I think we saw that by starting this with no topic at all.
Yeah. Escalation of force, though, is like, I think you and I heard the same exact thing, of somebody who described it very, very well. It's just because, that person could escalate before you're able to then escalate. So that's why it's almost, hey, I'm either at a 1 or I'm at a 10. There's no in between. It's a light switch, Yep. And if you are talking about life or death of yourself or somebody else, it almost has to be that way.
Yeah.
And it always is deployed. And that's why a lot of people found it problematic when the whole escalation of force became a real thing in the rules of engagement downrange, because there was a time frame that we had our hands tied, at least in terms of troops and contacts, dropping close air support and stuff like that, because we're still trying to win hearts and minds of whatever country we happen to be in. Like at that time was Afghanistan and Iraq. We're still trying to win hearts and minds. We're not going in, and I agree. We're not trying to go in there and destroy bridges, destroy infrastructure, kill innocent people. That is not a thing, right? But when you're in a fight, you're in a troops in contact, asking people like, okay, well, can you break away, or should you break away, or walking down those kind of, this caffeine, this trench coffee needs to kick in real fast. But
fantastic.
But like going through your checklist of things that, like, okay, per the ROEs, I need to do this. I need to do this. Okay, now I can't do this. Now I can do close air support.
Right.
Like that was a bad.
The problem with that. Yeah, the problem with that is that, number one, if you have to process that information, you take it away from like shooting and killing some threat that is in front of you is muscle memory. That's putting your sights on target, taking the slack out press. That's what that is, right? When you have to start thinking about, okay, and by the way, the enemy uses this against us all the time. They know our ROE, and then they exploit that ROE. In Bastion, when we were in the Helmand province in 2000, it had to be 2013 and 2014, there was the most ridiculous stuff, especially on the southern wall. There was a big desert, right? So like southern Afghanistan is not mountainous at all. It's a huge open, desert.
Dunes.
Like it's a little bit hilly, but it's nothing like northern Afghanistan. It's nothing like Bath in the mountains in the Hindu Kush. So no kidding. The escalation of force for the people protecting the base, which was Marines mostly, people would ride on scooters, and they would, or motorbikes, little whatever, and they would be driving around and they'd be looking for areas that they could attack the base. Bastion got overrun, I want to say a year before we got there. Most notably, the Alaska PJs responded to that one, but they, people breached the fence. They killed a couple Harriers. It was bad. They were dressed in American uniforms. One of them was actually dressed. They found him like a doctor, dressed like a doctor. So their intent was to gain access to these parts on base and kill people, right? Even after that, the escalation of force went, you were supposed to yell at these people to go away. Then as they were driving towards you, you had to yell at them again. And then they had pen flares, like signaling devices. And you were supposed to shoot a flare in the vicinity of the person driving
at a high rate of speed before you could shoot, before you could do any of this stuff. That's ridiculous. Once they figured out that they were not, like, once people figured out they weren't just getting shot from 500 yards away with a crew serve weapon, the probing attacks happened a lot. And you would see dudes, like military age males with a weapon slung, driving towards you in a vehicle. And no kidding, the Marines are like, okay, get the pen flares out. It was the most surreal thing of all time. Like, what are we doing? What are we here to do? And JT talked about it on the podcast where he came on. But what data is driving that? Like, what are we talking about? Why is this ROE a thing? Why are we allowing ourselves to do this thing that makes no sense and puts people at risk? People really died over, ROE and escalation of force. And you saw it all the time. And it's funny that we started talking really about like ethical decision making and trying to unpack problems. But, you saw it in Iraq too. Is a cell phone hostile intent? It is if that guy's a spotter. If there's somebody that's observing us and he's on a phone, should I be able to shoot them? I would argue probably yes. But that is an ethical dilemma that has been examined by JAGs and written into ROE for forever. Like, is that hostile intent? What happens when, the world kicks off around you and you're getting bracketed by borders because the guy is observing you and passing that information on?
Yeah, sometimes it feels like the person went through driver's ed but never actually drove a car, and then they write the rules for you, Right. Yeah.
So, and then somebody who's not actively involved in it, like in danger,
involved. Well, and like
the policy.
If like on the driving thing, like if you're on a 12-man team, there's like 15, maybe 20 of you total, depending on the team and what you're doing. Like you're not in a school bus. You're like on a motorcycle driving down the freeway. Mm-hmm. So like the how quickly things can go wrong, like you're already at 80, 90% there all the time. And you don't have a lot of room for error when it comes to your decision-making process. And so, they send this tool in there, and the tool is for the job. The thing that it's built for is to, destroy stuff. And the margin for error is very small. And that's what that tool is going to do in those circumstances. And then you ask that tool to do something different. It's like, you don't understand, like, how dangerous this is for us out here. Like, send in the school bus then. Don't send us in if you expect us to just sit around and make friends.
And listen, I get the reason why they did it, I think, and again, I don't know for sure, but I'm going to assume there's not malice intent. So I'm assuming that they are trying to do the best for the infrastructure, the people of whatever country that we happen to be in, right? Like, I believe there's probably good intent there, but at the same time, like you've also got to trust us. You have to trust the commanders on the ground. You have to trust the people that are on the ground in the moment. So, I should use proportional force, in the way that, like, okay, so, if I have a B1 overhead, right, and I have tons of 2,000-pound bombs on there that just wreak havoc, or I have a 250-pound bomb option and it's a couple of people, or it's like I'm using proportionality based off of what the target is. I don't just come in using a B1 carpet bomb using 2,000-pound bombs to get out of a tick. Like I'm probably, I have used them. I have used 4 2,000-pound bombs to get out of a tick, because that was correct for that situation. So you have to trust the folks that are on the ground or in that situation to then make the right call. Does that mean that 100% of the people that are in that position are going to make the right call? Absolutely not. Right. But you also have to trust them and give them benefit of the doubt and appropriate training. So that goes back to, instead of defunding police, right, we should be giving them increased funding so that they can be better trained. We can then send them to schools like Darcy comes into mind, right? The Direct Action Resource Center. There are tons of them. Fieldcraft Survival, Mike Glover's place. Like there are tons of places to send people to get them better training so that they are
basic
able
combatives.
To. Right.
Like holy cow. Like if policemen were required to be at like a blue belt jujitsu level, do you know how many that would actually be safer for the people they're apprehending. It would be way safer because if you there's a bunch of videos out there, you can see, jujitsu or grapplers, controlling very violent people in a manner that doesn't hurt them or anybody else. Like, because you get to a point where you're just like, I can impose my will on you in such a way. Untrained people, like, you can be strong, you can be on whatever drugs it is you want, you can be on PCP or meth or whatever else. It is actually safer for you to go up against a trained individual. And I use this analogy quite frequently too. I have never been hurt by a black belt in training. The only people that hurt me are white belts, because they just, you just don't know what you're doing. Yeah, they don't know when to stop. They don't know what effective control feels like.
No, well, that's the continuum of violence thing, though, right? Because you were talking about feeling threatened and what it takes for you to feel actually threatened. And once you cross that line, you go straight to 10, right? If you're a less capable person, and I mean like less trained, I'm not trying to like attack individuals that haven't been trained, but if you haven't been trained, that line, that fear line of threat is so much lower. So you go straight to 10 and with terrible consequences.
Well, that's why force on force training is so important, right? Using simunition. That teaches so much, because not only like whether it's in the house or whether it's out in kind of a mock village city, like, okay, one, it teaches you math because it teaches you angles, right? Like angles are very, very important. Mm-hmm. Doing that kind of stuff. But at the same time, it also teaches aggression. Like you've seen it in whether it's police videos or military videos, or even just, gang shootouts, that once people start getting shot at, like if they get hit, like it's like oh my God, and they're just, where in reality, of course, sometimes that you can't stand because you get blasted in the knee or something like that. Sure. But like force on force simunition training helps you like ready and engage a target, and knowing that you're getting shot at, or even if you are getting shot, to still try and neutralize and engage with that enemy. And it's such an important training event. It's huge and it hurts, but that's supposed to.
Yeah. And how many stories, like we all have friends that have been shot and had to fight through it. We have friends that, hey man, like they didn't just stop fighting. That's what that training breeds. I think it's in Leadership and Training for the Fight. Master Sergeant Paul Howe, retired GSO operator. I think that's where it came from. But he had a rule that good guys never die in training. So it doesn't matter. In training, you get to, if you're on, the opposing force, like you just continue. Like there's an opposing force and there's a team, because psychologically what that does is that helps you push through those events, so that, no kidding, you get used to, okay, something hurt. I got hit with a sim round, but I still have to clear my corner or the rest of the team's going to die. Okay. That's where you breed those habits. And I think that is the difference. And it is funny watching, I guess it's not funny, but it's not funny, but like watching these Instagram videos, especially of like violent assaults, and watching people I watched a video, terribly graphic video, but there was a dispute between two dudes. He sat down and stabbed this guy that he was in a dispute with, sitting down next to him. The guy took like 3 stabs and was just shocked. And he ended up dying, but he took like 3 stabs and he just kind of like looked at the guy, and then he started kind of like putting hands on him and pushing him away. That's terrifying. Like imagine one, a lot, like manage your distance. You allow that person that is an adversary to get so close to you. And then 2, you're in a fight for your life, dude. You got to turn it on. And he unfortunately paid for that, but training is really, really important.
Yep. Yeah. I want to say somebody can close 28 feet.
21.
I want to say it's 28. Is it 21 feet?
Yeah. 21 feet of distance. So, and it was a study with policemen, how fast they could get their service weapon out and neutralize a threat that was running at them. 21 feet is the distance, where unless you were very well trained, you were not going to clear that holster and engage that threat.
And it sounds like such a long distance too. You're like, 21 feet. And especially when you measure it out, you're like, oh, really?
That's like 4 peaches. You know what I mean?
Not even. No, I guess it is about 4 peaches. Yeah,
it is about 4 peaches. Using peach as a unit of measure. Yeah, using peach as
my favorite things.
Measure.
Yeah, but we live in a world that is outcome driven, right? and I listened to like Milton Friedman talk about this stuff, the intentions versus outcome. The intentions are the defund the police. What were the intentions behind that? It was, to keep really bad things from happening, but the outcome was more bad things happened, right? So like judging people and policies by their intentions is not always the best thing, but the outcomes. And I think that's where you get to step in and learn someone up. I'm good at English, so we learn them up when those outcomes become negative. That's when you have to intervene, because intentions in those situations, when it's going to affect people, their livelihood, their life, when those are the outcomes, then you have to step in.
Well, that's why funding cuts hurt bad, right? But fiscal constraints are a real thing that everybody has to deal with, even within your own households, right? But like, that's where you got to prioritize. Do we, if I'm going back to an STS, do we prioritize getting all new Arc'teryx cold weather stuff? The answer is, of course, yes.
Yes. Of course, yes.
Or do I pay for a little bit more advanced medical training, or do I pay for a little bit more force on force training, or whatever that is? Like, it's a prioritization of resources and training.
Yeah, we just went through our budget discussion. We had a very long budget discussion where we had to talk about, how much are we getting for the year? How are we going to allocate it? And newsflash, everybody, we did not get more money this year. This is one of the first years we got less money. We got less money by some percentage points. It wasn't like 20 percentage points, but it wasn't single digit percentage points either. So we had to have a very hard talk about, I know we talk about, we make the joke about, okay, well, everybody gets Arc'teryx everything all the time because nothing touches his skin except dead bird gang. But we had to have some very hard talks about, okay, well, if you want to outfit your brand new guys getting onto the troops in, $30,000 worth of watches and wetsuits and all these other things, okay, but you can't go off station in the fourth quarter. You're done. You have to find on station training. And everybody was like, whoa. And we were like, yeah, whoa is right. Number one, we're going to be in a fiscally constrained environment. And then number two, we had to have a hard talk about, what are we training for? I force everybody in my organization to give me their problem statement. So if you come to me and you're like, I want to go to Shaw shooting, and I go, okay, why? It really screws people up, because I want to hear, like, what METL are we supporting? What deployed task are you making better? Like, are you doing this to accept less risk? Are you doing this to become better at your primary duty? Are you doing this to become better at your additional duties? Like, tell me how this does stuff. And for a while, that would really stump people. They'd be like, well, we're deploying, so I want to go to CQC. I want to go shooting. I want to go to a driving school. I'm like, why? Are you going to drive on this? You have embassy drivers that drive you around, or you're not driving. You're going to be driven around. You're going to attach to somebody and go drive. So why are we going to a driving school? And they'd be like, well, because we always go to driving schools. I'm like, man, that might have worked 10 years ago. That doesn't work now, homie. Like, dude, I don't
think you've realized, like, we could go into a whole nother podcast with this, which would be an excellent episode for like Greg Smith. But we start talking about policy to action, taking all these high level policies. And this is what's good. And we should do an episode on policy to action. It could be boring, but I tell you what, it'd be great mentorship and education for some of the folks going in to understand, like, hey, when you're asking for that problem statement, or you're asking, hey, why do you need to go to a driving school? Or how do you prioritize Shaw shooting over, doing a level one jump trip? Like,
right.
And why, the why, of how you're doing it. Real quick though. And I'd throw it out to either one of you guys, but can, one of you guys explain what METLs are, or mission essential task list? Or I can do it. I don't care.
I'm happy to. Trent, do you want to? I don't care.
No, not really.
Okay, got it. So, mission essential task list. So a METL is something that you're training for. We talked about, we're going to drop a reel soon. I talked about the AFSO 4-gen. So for us, that's the Special Operations Force Generation Cycle. The Air Force is going to the same model. It's the AF 4-gen, Air Force Generation Cycle. In that 20-month cycle, you are given a task at the beginning of 20 months. Okay. Technically, you're given a little bit beforehand because you need to plan for the entire cycle. So usually when you're deployed, that's the committed phase, you know, per the GIF map, where you're going to deploy. So global force management assignment process GIF map.
I think so. Yeah, I can confirm.
Okay. Anyway,
that.
That was a long acronym.
So hey, what do you know? We speak in acronyms, and then most of the time we don't even truly know what they are.
You're just guessing. Yeah, there's nothing I love better than a good TLA, 3-letter acronym. Anyway, so in that training phase, or in that force generation cycle, you're given METLs. Think of it like a menu. We know where we're going and we know what we're going to do, right? So we always do access, strike, and recovery. That's what AFSOC does. ST does access, global access, precision strike, and personnel recovery, right? And as a fourth, battlefield surgery with SOST. What we do is we know where we're going, we know what team is going to go where, and we know what mission they're going to do. So say you are going to Africa and you are going to do global access. You know 20 months ahead of time what it is that you're going to do. That is a mission essential task. And you have a list of those mission essential tasks. And it sounds like be prepared to, and it'll say conduct these things. And it's in an order, an operations order, where it lists out, no kidding, everything that you're expected to do as a team during that committed phase that's going to happen in the future. And everything in that training cycle is supposed to directly support those METLs. So we always do access, strike, and recovery, but then we hone it down. And maybe you're going to an area in the Middle East and you are going to do precision strike and precision strike alone. Well, that is how you plan your entire 20 months for your team of operators, is that you say, this is the task list that I have. Now, in theory, every single thing you do in that 20 months should be directly focused at one of those METLs. So when I ask you, why are you going to a shooting school? You should be able to point to a task and say, it says I have to be prepared to conduct raids and ground-based operations in support of the task force. Oh, okay. Well, then, yeah, it totally makes sense. You got to go to a shooting school. Or maybe you're going to Africa and you're doing air-to-ground integration and you're training a partner force. Like, we teach partner forces all types of stuff, how to shoot, how to move, how to communicate, medicine. Maybe you want to go to Shaw Shooting because you want to focus on the instructional aspect of shooting. And you want to become a better shooter, but you want to become such a better shooter that now you can instruct. And that's why you're telling me, like, it says I have to teach the partner forces how to shoot. Well, I need to go to this school that teaches me how to be an instructor, and then I need to go to a shooting school so that I can be the example for the students. That's how it's supposed to work.
And it doesn't mean that you just focus on that entirely. That is the focus, but like there's also upgrades. Like when we start talking about 3 levels, 5 levels, 7 levels within special tactics, whatever the career fields are, like, that is inherent. You have to be able to train to upgrade people. And sometimes there are events that you've got to do that don't necessarily align with the METLs, but you still need to do it in order to get people upgraded.
Right. And that's where the first 2 phases really of the 20-month cycle is the individual training phase and the unit training phase. Those 2 phases are meant to focus on those upgrades specifically. So, does Trent need to be at this Air Force, professional military educational course to do a deployed task? No.
Yes.
But it's part of his. No. Yeah. Yes. No, but it's part of his upgrade. So we would put that in the individual phase, that very first phase. We try to get you to your jump master schools, your upgrade schools, your PMEs, those one-off courses that you have to take. That is the time that you focus on that. And then the unit training phase is more team focused. So that's where you're getting together as a team and you're doing your team leader upgrades. You're doing your team commander upgrades. You're doing all of those other things that are more team focused and making you a better team, but are also moving towards that committed task.
Yep.
Man, I'm so glad you answered that. My answer would have been like sarcastic and short. I'm like, it's called mission essential task. Like, what do you think it is? There's a mission, there's tasks. It's what you got to do. Like, why am I explaining this to you?
You got to train for them.
Do you speak English, folks? Yeah.
Aaron, what did you say GIF map was?
What's that?
What did you say
Global
GIF map was?
Force Management Assignment Process?
Allocation plan.
Allocation plan. Nice. Yeah. Good job. Way to call that one down.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll tell you what, I typically have a computer brain for a lot of these, but there are still acronyms that I use to this day that I have no clue what it means. No clue.
Hey,
There's one, I don't know if it's protected or not. We will talk about it. I don't know if I can say there's one acronym that it's a total reindeer game, right? Because we all say it when we get off here. I'll say it to you, and maybe we'll readdress. We all say it. We all know exactly what it is. You cannot tell me what it means though, and it's in all caps, and it is spelled out like an acronym should be spelled out. However, it is 100%. You're like, wait a second, what does that mean? And it's one of these things. It's like a hip pocket trading. Every once in a while, your team leader's like, hey man, tell me what the TOPs are. And you have to be like, oh crap, receive the mission, issue the warno, make a tentative plan, initiate necessary movement, make reconnaissance, blah, blah, blah. It's one of those that somebody asked me and I was like, oh, what does that mean? I've never seen it spelled out. Yeah. And then I was like playing Stump the Chump, and we were deployed, by the way. So I had literally every system that I needed, every high side system. There's a million people I could call and speak in plain language. And I never figured it out. Nate Cox that we had on the podcast is the one that leveled that charge at me. This is 2009. Still haven't figured it out. Never gotten a good answer. And I've asked the subject matter experts. So it's a good one. We'll talk about it moving on.
Do you have something?
No, I don't.
I wanted to go to take a step back, like 20 minutes. When we started talking about cart narcs and putting carts away and stuff like that,
mm-hmm.
What do you think the psychology is in that? Like in terms of somebody who feels that it's necessary to put their carts away, or versus somebody who feels that they're completely justified in leaving their cart right where it is because, well, they have people for that. You know what I'm saying? Like,
oh, I know exactly what you're saying. Yeah.
And I'm totally taking us into a direction that all three of us have no idea what the psychology is on it. It's weird to me because I do think about that when I see people do it, or, as I'm taking my cart back, I can sit here and I go, what kind of person, like, what is it? Is it the way I was raised? Is it what I've learned in the military?
Laziness? Is it entitlement? Is it, whatever? Yeah. Well, I always laugh at this because my very first job, I worked at a grocery store and I was a cart dude. I packed groceries and I was a cart guy. Like that was what I did. So for me, I always just laugh because I'm like, I have chased down carts that people didn't bother putting away in freezing weather in Northeast Ohio. Imagine being from Ohio, first of all, but freezing cold weather. It's okay. Ohio's not real. And also birds are not real. They're part of the bourgeoisie. Look it up, nerds. Birds are 100% part of the bourgeoisie. But, but that speaks to, okay, well, what in this other person's life did they not do? Did they not have this experience where they can just leave their cart out and leave it for somebody else? And, maybe it's entitlement. Maybe it's, they do have people for that. I could see if I was going to try to argue this, which I would never do. Cart narcs, please don't put me on any of your watch lists. I always put my cart away. But I could argue from a point of, well, I put my stuff in my car. I'm ready to leave. They pay people to police these carts up. I don't need to put this back. I don't need to put this back all the way for them. I don't need to do their job. They can just collect the carts. Okay, that's not the type of person that I am. I couldn't do that because I feel, again, there's a social contract that we have with people in the service industry. It's like tipping. I will not tip less than 20. I constantly get told I tip too much because even if I get mediocre service, I'm tipping 20%. Like that's it. Like if you're basically that's it. I never go below. Now, when we start talking about like, man, you don't tip subway workers that work at but they made your sandwich. Why don't we tip them? You know what I mean?
That's what I was going to say. The automatic tip thing now, where it's like just for a transaction. Hey, do you want to tip? So
yeah, you didn't do anything. Yeah, you're working a register. Like I would tip the people that are making the thing that I'm getting. However, but that's part of the social contract that I think is important. Like you served me, you provided me a service. For me, the baseline is 20%. I'm going to tip you 20% on whatever bill it is. because you took the time out of your day to provide me a service. I think the cart thing is sort of in the same vein. I get it that there's people that get paid to do this. However, I don't need to be a dick about it. I can put my cart back.
Well, I think it just depends on how you view other people. Do the people that don't put their carts back, that are like habitual, like they have people that are paid to do this, you know, like do they view the people that put the carts back as like actual people? Do they empathize with them? You know, like when the way I visualize people is we all have like arrows that are going away from us and arrows towards us, right? Like I'll bet you if you did a poll of all the people that don't put their carts back and you had conversations with them, the number of times that they said I in a sentence or in a conversation far exceeds the number of times the other people that put the carts back would say I in a conversation. And that's what I think it is. They think they're the center of their own universe. Like someone's getting paid to do this. Like I'm expected to do my job. I'm expected, blah, blah, blah. It's a very self-centered attitude. Versus the being able to see beyond themselves, second and third order effects, the greater construct of our society and how everything interacts with everything else. So that's what I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was just curious about it, what you guys thought, just because there is definitely a psychology that is associated with it. And I agree with you, Aaron, like, hey, there are people that are getting paid for this, to do this. Are they just like every other industry, though, where there's labor shortages? I don't care what the job numbers are. Like, you know, like there are people like, especially here in Vegas, that we go into places and they're walk-in interviews. We were just in a place, Donna and I were just in a place the other day, and they were like, walk-in interviews, please apply. If you even think about getting a job. And it's like, wow,
what happened over the last 2 years? And, you know, I'll use, you know, voting as one. There's still states right now that are counting votes. Like, this never was a thing. This was not a thing before 2020. Like, election day is election day. When in the world did we turn it into election week where you have all these votes? Well, like, oh, well, it's mail-in balloting and it takes a while to count it. No, Florida had the results in a night. We're the most advanced technological society in the world. Brazil had a massive election. We knew the results in one day. I don't know what it is. But to the jobs thing, people gaslight me all the time and tell us how good the jobs numbers are. I have never seen more stores that shut down early. Some just don't open. There are stores. I was getting a haircut. Excuse me. I was getting a haircut. And as always, you're just BSing with the person cutting your hair. And they were like, oh, yeah, the Lakewood location had to shut down. And I was like, oh, why did Lakewood is right next to JBLM. It's a haircut place right next to a huge joint base. How did it ever shut down? And they were like, yeah, there weren't enough people to work. They would just close on Saturdays. They didn't have enough business. They would just close.
And you know, Joe needs a haircut.
Joe needs a haircut. When did that happen? When did we get to a point? I walk in to places and now like the same refrain. It was a joke during COVID, but it was like, please be nice to us. We're working, you know, super short staffed and whatever else. I was flying through Dallas airport. I got delayed. I ended up getting canceled that night. I'm sitting at the bar watching some random show, hoping that my flight ends up happening. And it's like 6 o'clock at night. And the bartender's like, hey, sorry, it's last call. And I was like, what do you mean last call? It's 6 o'clock. There are flights that leave out of here at midnight. I was like, okay, well, where's open? And she was like, nowhere. There's nowhere that's open. There's not enough staff to keep the things running.
Yep.
What happened? Where did all these people go? How are people making money? And why can you not just walk in and interview and get a job wherever you want? Because that's what I perceive. That's what I see in the environment.
I mean, that's happening. And Trent, I wanted to ask you something because you brought something up earlier, and this is why I write things down, because I forget. Because
you're the only smart one.
No, Trent writes stuff down too, which is really good. But you said something
now I'm the
earlier.
dumb one. Perfect.
No, I just can't remember stuff.
I just can't. Yeah, it's not about being smart. I just can't remember.
I've been hit up here a few times.
Yeah. Anyway, if I can't remember it, then we may as well
Did you want to talk about
who's
Milton
not
Friedman?
having a later?
Did I bring up Milton Friedman?
Yes, you did.
Did you?
Never mind.
Yeah.
Maybe that's not what I said.
I don't know. It could have been. It was based off of what Aaron's talking about, though. But you know who's not having a labor shortage? Hoist. Hoist isn't having a labor shortage.
I love it. What a fantastic.
They've got awesome flavors: orange, peach mangoes, the bomb. That
punch.
Raspberries, the bomb. Wow, that's wow.
Oh my God, Hoist wasn't around in the 1990s, but Peach's lexicon was.
Apparently so. Jeez.
Are we gonna do a commercial where we all say "What's up" to each other with Hoist, or is that
What's up? What's up? This is turning into the worst episode of The Office I've ever seen. Go to drinkhoist.com.
Yeah.
Use the code One's Ready. Get yourself some of the packets. The packets are my favorite. You can get the premix. If you go to the premix to the bottle, the new blue raspberry, fantastic. It's the best. It's the best flavor out there. So drinkhoist.com.
Yeah, and then
delicious.
if you're already hydrated, and go hit Eberlestock to get you some nice modular LEO or military or hunting pags. Those guys are killing it. Eberlestock.com, promo code OR10. That is OR10, and get yourself some good stuff. You're supporting a great company, great friends of ours, and I think not every single one of them, I'm sure, but like there's quite a few of them that have also served their country. So they serve their country, and now they're serving you with phenomenal products. So make sure you check them out.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I was going to say that the people that also leave their carts behind are the ones that when they find out that police officers or military people got killed, they're like, well, they signed up for that job. It's part of the job.
Jesus, what a hot take. Welcome to the podcast, everybody. Yikes. Yeah, that does happen. And man, there's part of it, like we said it, like, and it's funny, like the same message can come out, but depending on where it comes from, we either hate it or we don't. How many times have you heard that at work and just been like, okay, yeah, I guess that is it. Like, hey, sorry, we do dangerous stuff, everybody, but that's kind of what the job is. For us to say that to each other, totally fine. Some blue-haired Seattle resident says it to me on the street, and we got to have a talk, my guy, or they, them, whatever your pronouns are, because that's not appropriate. Hey, Peaches, just flag that so you can put it out.
I need to make sure
I think that's fine. I think those are accepted pronouns with the they.
What I was going to say is, that episode that we can't air, but I put a bunch of reels out. I got asked like, hey, when's this one going to release? And I was like, hey,
never.
We can't.
Absolutely.
Nope. We will not release that one because
we canceled all 3 of us minutes of content.
Yeah,
by ourselves.
Yeah.
Well, we canceled 40 minutes of content to make sure that we didn't cancel the rest of our lives or channels. So
we all 3 of us woke up either grumpy or whatever it was, because we came in hot.
Hard in the paint. So here's my question then. Can those people, let's say you have somebody that doesn't put their cart away, they don't tip, they don't value other people, they have these things. Can they train themselves to be better? And if so, how? What do they do?
Yeah, most people grow out of being teenagers and they become adults. I think that's
yep.
So I'd say most people go through those phases fairly naturally. It's just odd when you see like a 52-year-old person that's still in that zone where they're such the victim, like it's all about them. They don't understand why they should like help with anybody else. Like you were just in the grocery store. If you pick something up from like one aisle and you take it 4 aisles over and you decide you don't want it anymore, what do? Do you just drop it on the ground? Because they have people. They have people though that stock the shelves. It's their job to put stuff on shelves. Why don't you just drop it on the ground right there? Because they got people that work there that are supposed to clean stuff up. We got people that go fight wars for us if they die. Who cares? We got people to do these things.
And I do think that there's levels to that too, right? There's the people that, hey, they have a box of cereal and they leave it someplace that it didn't originate from there, or they drop some ice cream or some meat, something that needs to be refrigerated, and they just leave it there. It's like, okay, now that was extra dickish that you just did that. Like, it's one thing that you just left the box of cereal, but like now that ice cream or that meat is now ruined. Like, I mean, there's no going back from it, you know?
Yeah.
And that's not to judge every single person that does it. Obviously, there is somebody who, you know, has got a ton of kids that they're, you know, dragging around the freaking, the store, you know. It's like, okay, well, I got to walk all the way back to whatever. Okay, fine. Maybe just give it to an employee then. Like, if you're that, like
if you're
hey,
that
listen,
pressed for time, like, what are we doing? That's like, man, go Trent.
The further they have to go to get carts, the more people that they have to hire to fetch carts, because it costs money to buy carts. The more people that they have to pay to clean up your store and to stock the shelves, the more people that they have to pay to do everything. Who do you think pays for that? Do you think the grocery store just takes a huge loss just because the people in that community are a bunch of a-holes? Or
absolutely,
do they pass on to that cost to the customers?
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, being able to think, you know, second, third order effects, how everything affects everything else, it only makes everybody's life a better, easier, less expensive.
Yeah, 100%. And I'm glad that we learned the word inflation during this last election cycle. I was told that we never knew what inflation was before then by the world's dumbest pundit,
I heard about
Joy
that.
Reid. Yeah, she's honestly in the pantheon of stupid. She is remarkably stupid, almost to the point of like, are you really that incompetent? Are you purposely gaslighting people for views on the internet? And I think it's probably the latter and not the former. She's historically dumb.
And there you go. Well,
I don't know.
I'm glad. I will say, as we close this up, I'm glad that I could accompany Trent to Senior NCO Academy. I do
little piece
acknowledge that I see him. I see myself in every
single video.
Hey, little buddy. Stop being so dickish.
Did we get that little Peaches together, or did you have that when I got down to Texas?
No, it's when you were visiting. I had it overnighted. I just found it on Amazon, and it showed up the next day.
So that we could podcast it. It's fantastic.
Like, it is super creepy. Just face out.
Because you could tear his face out, and then there's another face behind it. You know what?
I don't know what you got going on here, but it's weird.
You know, we started off talking about ethical decision making, and we started off talking about some things, and that the fact that there is a face there, I believe it's a Japanese proverb, but you have three faces. You have the face that the world sees, the face that you think the world sees, and then who you truly are. And that Tiny Peaches really does have multiple faces. What a way to wrap it all up completely and totally unintentionally. Thanks for hanging out with us, everybody. I don't know what this episode was, but I'll tell you what it was to us. It was fun. Hope you learned something. Go to onesready.com, check out the shop, get yourself a sweet hoodie. Those Sport Tech hoodies dropped. They're fire. I'm putting mine on here in a moment because it's cold as crap up here in the Pacific Northwest. Thanks for following. Check us out on YouTube. Don't forget, we're on Rumble now as well, so the episodes get uploaded there as well. It's a free speech platform. Maybe that's the place where we can put out that terrible episode that we didn't watch. No, probably not. Thanks for coming out, everybody. Have a good one. Train hard.
Later.